Yeah. Okay. So where are we going with you and I? We had dinner. It was the Feast of All Saints, and we were talking about this. What does 2020 look like? What is 2021, 2022? If Francis goes on for another 7, 8 years,
Oh my
where
goodness.
what is his agenda? What is the goal and end game of Pope Francis Bergoglio?
Well, you get into this term that Antonio Sochi has defined, which is Bergoglianism. What is Bergoglianism?
Yep.
Bergoglianism is the fulfillment of the process that began at the council, where the church encounters the modern world, opens itself to the modern world, and becomes the modern world, absorbed into the modern world as just an element of the modern world, no longer the fortress church. You know, these liberals in the church, they mock the idea of the fortress church. Of course, the church is a fortress. It's a fortress against error that protects us from error. And you come into the fortress when you convert, and you're protected from the slings and arrows of the world. Well, they mock the fortress church, which is symbolized, by the way, by the Vatican walls. The Pope condemns walls in other countries, but he lives behind walls himself, in a place where there's no immigration allowed, by the way.
Exactly.
But the fortress church is being dismantled. The ramparts are down, and the world is invading the church. It's as if you have a nice warm house and you open all the windows, which is the other metaphor. We open the windows and let the fresh air in. And then the inside of the house achieves equilibrium with the frozen outside world. And so we have basically an adequation or an equalization of the church and the world, which is happening more and more as the world penetrates the church. Back in 1973, Dietrich von Hildebrand said, "The poison of our epoch is slowly seeping into the church herself, and many have failed to see the apocalyptic decline of our time." Well, now it isn't seeping in, it's pouring in. And so if he goes on for another 7 years, God only knows what will happen. It's clear he doesn't think much of the teaching against contraception. It's clear he wants to abolish clerical celibacy. If he did everything he wanted to do, we would end up like the Anglicans. Not even the Anglicans.
Yeah.
We wouldn't even have a high Anglican liturgy.
Yeah.
I got admitted to the South Carolina bar. I was in Columbia, South Carolina. I saw the Anglican Cathedral. Very impressive. It's a tourist attraction. So I went into the Anglican Cathedral to look at it. And there was a tour guide. I told him I was a Catholic, and he took me on the tour. We went up to the communion rail. There were pillows in front of the communion rail. I said, "Pillows? Did they kneel to receive communion here?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, we make a big deal of it. Not like you Catholics." So,
Let me tell you, Christopher, I was an Anglican priest before I became a Catholic.
I know.
Every single one that I did was ad orientem.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
only time I didn't do ad orientem was when I went to go visit the elderly at the nursing home, and the chapel there was set up by guess who? Catholics.
Yeah.
And so we had to do it versus populum at the nursing home because that's how the Catholics had it all set up.
Yeah. And not only that, you look at the liturgical text in the same Anglican cathedral, and I'm not saying that there's any validity to Anglican orders, not far from it, but I picked up the Book of Common Prayer and I started reading it. I said, "Wow, if only the Novus Ordo in English were this dignified."
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite the slap to the face.
The magnitude of the crisis is such that you could pick up the Book of Common Prayer and wish that we had the Book of Common Prayer. Not that we would want the Book of Common Prayer, but that's how bad it is.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law saw a Catholic wedding. My late mother-in-law. She came home and told me how appalled she was at the lack of dignity at a Catholic wedding. People whooping and hollering and applauding at a wedding. So if this isn't apocalyptic in scope, I don't know what would be. So if this Pope goes on another 7 years, God forbid, he'll spew errors of all kinds.
Yeah.
Not just the repeal of the teaching on the death penalty, not just the permission for adulterers to receive Holy Communion. He'll apply his idea of discernment to contraception.
Yep.
Well, in a complex circumstance, you can be justified in using contraception, but you should really discern while you receive Holy Communion, partaking of contraception, that you shouldn't be contracepting. That kind of nonsense. He'll attack that teaching. And of course, priestly celibacy will go down the tubes. It's already been set in motion.
Okay, so people don't completely despair. Let's kind of close up here and talk about what it means to recognize and resist.
Sure. I mean,
I think that's helpful. We need this.
okay. Here we're dealing with a paradox, and the paradox is this: bad news is good news. I don't want to hear about temporizing measures that Francis said something orthodox today,
Right.
gave us a little soupçon of orthodoxy to slake our hunger for the truth. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear nothing but bad news. Why? Because when things get this bad in salvation history, you know the dramatic resolution is on the way. This can't go on forever. There has to be a final roundup in which God sets right everything that has gone wrong. There's no reason to despair. We still have the faith. We can still find, the Catholics who want the faith can find it. You know, it's the church adjusts itself and provides to those who seek it the truth, even if it becomes more difficult to find. You may end up out in a liturgical desert somewhere, but there are still good priests, there are good confessors. There are priests in the Novus Ordo establishment who are good priests and good confessors. Some of them, in fact, are more traditional. They're sounding more traditional these days than some of the people in the traditionalist orders. So it's a complex situation. It's not the end. We're in a situation that's chaotic, that's confusing, that's in some respects terrifying, but the truth is still there to be had. Good priests are still to be found. The sacraments are still available. The supernatural life of the church has not been extinguished. The problem is in the human element of the church. No matter how distorted it seems to us, no matter how chaotic the situation is in the human element, the church is still there. And so the more bad news we get, in a way, it's a cause for hope that the end is near, the end of this crisis is near, and that there's going to be a resolution. All it will take is a courageous and holy Pope. The Pope could, in a matter of days, rectify so much of the damage that has been caused. I mean, look what Benedict did. The liturgical scene is hugely improved in the church. Now you can get Latin masses everywhere.
Yeah, every town in America has it almost.
Yeah, and the graces flowing from those masses are immeasurable. So you can't kill the church. You know, you can kill off the human element in vast sectors of the church. Maybe an analogy would be a patient who has third-degree burns over 80% of his body. But there are patches of healthy skin, and the damage can be repaired. And the patches of healthy skin are there, and they're going to grow and grow and grow over time. That's the other thing. We're outbreeding the people in the so-called Novus Ordo establishment. We're having more children.
Yeah.
You know, so over time, the situation would resolve itself gradually. But I don't think we have to wait another 50 years. I'm not a prophet, but I think he's pushing things to the ultimate, to the point where there has to be some sort of dramatic intervention from on high, or he'll pass from the scene and we'll get a good pope. So I'm not despairing. I have absolute confidence in the church's indefectibility, even if I don't have the Pollyanna-ish idea that everything that comes out of the mouth of the Pope is an infallible truth, which has caused incredible damage to the church. This papalatrous notion of the impeccable and always infallible Pope. So no, there's no cause for despair. Simply look for the good priest, the good parish, the good confessor, and you'll find him. And it may even be a good priest or a good parish within the Novus Ordo. Maybe you can't get to the traditional mass and you found at least a decent, reverently offered Novus Ordo. There are certain places where the Novus Ordo is offered facing the altar. And you have a solid priest who, because he's under a bishop who would destroy him in a minute, can't introduce the traditional mass, but he's doing everything he can to bring back tradition. You know, we're not the pure ones, the Cathari, who can't associate with people outside of the traditionalist parishes and communities. No, we have many friends in the Novus Ordo establishment who don't have access to anything better, and they're doing the best they can. And that's the other danger, by the way. Mike Matt wrote a column about the ugly traditionalist. He talks about a traditionalist who was upbraiding some woman because she was wearing pants in church. She had come in. She was attracted by the beauty of the traditional sanctuary and the liturgy. And the woman kept hounding the woman in the pants, and the woman in the pants got up and left and maybe never came back. Yeah. We're going to avoid that pitfall as well.
Yeah.
We're not the pure ones. We're just as much sinners as anybody else on the face of the earth. It's just that we appreciate what we get from the traditional sacraments as channels of grace, which show what they convey. When the liturgy doesn't show what it conveys, people forget what the liturgy conveys. Yes. Lex orandi, lex credendi. That's why we're traditionalists, not because we're better than anybody else, but because we know we're not better than anybody else, and we need the best that we can get from the church to maintain a sacramental life and to avoid falling into sin. So don't despair. Look for the good priest and the good parish wherever you can find it, and wait for this situation to be resolved, as it certainly will be in time.